Welcome to Sherdog.com. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with Off the Chain, the weekly panel discussion show. And as always, got a fine panel. So let me go ahead and start by introducing everyone. Now, our special guest this week is Michael Fiedel, a writer for Body Lock and Flow Combat, I believe. Correct, Mike?
Yes, sir.
All right, so he's done some excellent work centered around one championship. I just have a strange feeling we might talk about a little bit of that promotion today. You never know. So thanks, Mike, for joining us. And, of course, we've got the senior editor of Sherdog.com. That is one Ben Duffy, the master of all trades. Yes, he's no longer the jack of all trades. He's just mastered them all at this point. So he is the master of all trades. Ben Duffy, what's up, my man?
You know what? It was a scorching August day in Texas. I went and mowed my lawn today. Country boy can survive, but just barely. I'm just really excited to talk about one championship, to weigh in on it, if you will.
Ooh. All right. See that Sherdog's own Hank Hill with the pun. And we've got Jay Pettry, our resident man with the stats, with the numbers, with all the facts and information that you need, the play-by-play guy for the fights as well. So, Jay, how are you doing?
Good. How you guys doing? All right. I'll lead with the stat of the week. One. The number one, not the promotion one. The number one is the number of significant kisses landed by Yoel Romero on Paolo Costa after their fight. All right, okay, you guys. I see you guys don't like that as much. That doesn't tickle your fancy quite as much. 304. It's the number of significant strikes landed in the main event of a heavyweight fight, more than any heavyweight fight in the UFC ever. Oh my God, 300 times they hit each other in the face and body and legs. Yeah, so there you go.
Well, what a perfect stat to start us off, because our first topic is that heavyweight title fight that we saw, the main event of UFC 241. I was there in Anaheim for that. I am exhausted from fight week, as fight week always just takes everything out of me as I return to my regular, less violent life. So, buy or sell, gentlemen. Stipe Miocic is the greatest heavyweight in MMA history. Michael, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you very much, and thank you guys for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure. And of course, this is a topic that I feel strongly about, but not in the way you might think. I feel like the sport is still very young. To be talking about the greatest of all time seems a little bit premature, but to their credit of Stipe Miocic and other heavyweights, they've done a lot of things. They've accomplished a lot of things that make them on that Mount Rushmore, if you will. So I do think it's neck and neck between Stipe Miocic and Fedor Emelianenko. I think if the question was the greatest heavyweight in UFC history, Stipe without a doubt. But MMA history, Fedor's got a legacy and his in-context wins that make it very difficult for me to go with Stipe. Now, recency bias could make me go in that direction, but I think for Fedor Emelianenko to, and this is to quote the great Artem Lobov, who tweeted this, Fedor went to the ground with Big Nog. He went to the feet with Crow Cop. He went wrestling toe-to-toe with Randleman and Coleman. He's someone who did what his opponents could do better than they could do it themselves. So for me, Fedor is going to take the cake, but I think Stipe is closing the gap soon.
All right. Excellent words right there. Quoting legendary, undefeated BKFC star Artem Lobov. Very nice work there, Michael. So, Ben, let's get your take, man. Buy or sell, Stipe, the greatest MMA heavyweight ever?
I'm going to cautiously say yes. And I mean, in terms of recency bias, I come from the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, when I first got into this sport in kind of, mid to late 2004, Fedor Emelianenko was indisputably the greatest heavyweight on the planet. And people could tell even at the time that he was well on his way to being the greatest of all time. Like he was revolutionary. So I've, for 15 years now, I've come to the sport from the point of view that you're going to have to prove to me that somebody else is greater. At this point, between Miocic and Emelianenko, it really boils down to what you value. I mean, Fedor went undefeated for almost 10 full years. Just an unbelievable run. And he did it under, the brightest of lights on that white canvas that just made everything he did look like a fucking superhero. But at the same time, Miocic has only been a pro fighter for 10 years. And what he has done in that time, I mean, he's racked up as many quality wins in the last 5 years as Fedor did in his almost 10-year run. Because Miocic, being in the UFC, has fought the best guy every time out. Some of them have been greater than others, but every time out, he's been fighting someone very, very credible. Meanwhile, you look back at Fedor's legendary run, find me his best 3 fights in a row. And they're probably his very first 3 fights in Pride, which is Schilt, Herring in the first Nogueira fight. Everywhere else, he fights a good guy, and then there's a Zuluzinho. He fights a great guy, and then there's Naoya Ogawa. And it's tough to stay undefeated when you're fighting a really, really good guy every time out. You know, when there are no easy outs. So I very narrowly do give it to Stipe at this point, but I'll just, probably mute my email box for the next week once this gets out and all the Pride people jump on me. Like, I'm on your side, people.
All right, Jay. So, are we getting premature in this talk, or are you feeling Stipe as the greatest heavyweight ever?
Well, it's interesting that the way it's phrased is that it's the greatest heavyweight in MMA history because, like Mike said, I will sell that he's the greatest heavyweight in MMA history. For now, we're not far off. We're maybe a year or two off from having a very interesting discussion that's going to make a lot of people really upset. But in the UFC, I do have to buy that in UFC context. For what it's worth, Fight Matrix, which has stats and numbers, formulas, and scores to evaluate how good a fighter is based on numbers and how much the win's worth and head-to-head rankings, have it Fedor, Big Nog, Cain, Velasquez, Stipe, and Mauricio Verdum as their top 5. Now, I still think Fedor gets it for me because, his run in Pride, he didn't lose in 15 fights in Pride. He had the cut that made it so he didn't have a 15-fight win streak, but he was unbeaten in 15 fights. But really, let's be honest. Fedor started his career, for all intents and purposes, at 31-0. His loss was to Tsuyoshi Kosaka in rings, and in rings, the rule set was different, such that in their tournament, there are no elbows allowed. Now, Fedor got cut with an illegal elbow, and that stopped the fight. And because there has to be a winner to advance, this is in the old rings rules, because there's a winner that has to advance, Fedor lost because he could not continue because of his cut. So in the context of his rule set and his promotion, he lost. But in terms of actual objectively looking at what happened, it would be declared no contest in many other rule sets. I take issue with Cain. A lot of people say Cain is still the greatest heavyweight, but then you stack the resumes up. And I just still have to give it to Stipe when you do these two stacked against each other. Cain's best wins are the 2 nasty beatdowns of Dos Santos. His just demolitions of Bigfoot Silva are probably up there. He smoked Brock Lesnar. He knocked out Nogueira, Rothwell, Congo Brown. Okay, those are good names. But then you look at Stipe and what he's done. Roy Nelson. Okay, he didn't fall for the Roy Nelson game and beat the tar out of him. Gabriel Gonzaga, okay, all right, and whatever. Then you start going bigger. Mark Hunt, Andrei Arlovsky, Fabricio Verdum, Alistair Overeem, Junior Dos Santos, Francis Ngannou, Daniel Cormier. I still have to give it to Stipe in terms of heavyweight in the UFC. And one last thing. It doesn't always matter, but it matters to me. Post-fight bonuses. For Cain Velasquez, 4. For Stipe Miocic, 9. There we go. I have fingers too. Yeah. Anyway, so just the level and the way he did everything, I just still got to give it to Stipe.
But yeah, it's hard for me. I'm sorry to cut you off, Jay. It's just hard for me to like support Cain Velasquez as the greatest heavyweight of all time. Like I'm okay with saying he's the greatest heavyweight talent that we've seen. I fully am on board with that. The problem is if the guy fights once every 4 years, it's really hard to actually rack up a resume that stacks up. I mean, looking at the list of names that Stipe has taken out, I mean, we forget like Philip DeFries, named early in his career, who's now the KSW heavyweight champion. Fabricio Verdum, who's on that list that you mentioned. Where'd you say that list came from?
Fight Matrix. From
Fight Matrix. Like, I mean, that list seems incredibly flawed if it's just relying on the stats, but there's just too many good names that he's taken out to not be in that conversation. So by far in the UFC, yes. Overall MMA, I'm probably still going to say yes, because let's face it, Fedor had some freak show fights that really didn't mean anything. There is no Hungman Choi on Stipe Miocic's resume. There is no sort of just odd guy who just doesn't belong there in a non-title fight as Pride like to do. So I'm okay with saying Stipe, but quite honestly, a trilogy fight with Cormier could change that. And that's a very interesting wrinkle to this that makes what we saw Saturday even greater. That this was sort of this could be a deciding thing. Who is the greatest heavyweight that the UFC has seen or MMA has seen in that one fight? So very interesting stuff there. I'm very curious as to what's next for Cormier, and I know that is a topic for discussion a little bit later. But let's get to the one guy who stole the show for UFC 241 fight week included. I actually, not a bad choice right there. But I'm talking about Nate Diaz, who finally made his return after a 3-year layoff. We last saw him at UFC 202 against Conor McGregor and lost what was a very, very close decision. So I'm going to start with you, Ben. Do you think this is the actual return of Nate Diaz? Does his win over Anthony Pettis signal that Nate Diaz is here to stay?
I'm buying cautiously. This is still Nate Diaz. He is a sensitive and mercurial individual. Somebody could say the wrong thing. He could get pissed off and walk away for another 3 years. This is a guy that has proven that he is willing to die on any hill at any time. But I believe that he is back for good, barring something like that. I mean, the timing of his return was outstanding. He got a pretty good money fight against the guy that stylistically was, a winnable fight. And the thing that you have to credit Diaz with, his personality, you may love or may hate it, but he's a straight shooter. And even at the press conference, he flat out said, I don't want to fight some dude that's just going to wrestle me and find a way to game the rules and beat me on points. I want to find a badass martial artist and see if I can whoop his ass. I believe him when he says that. And every decision he's made in his career has borne that out. Because of that, the Pettis fight made sense, and so does the Masvidal fight.
Yeah, for sure.
If I were him, I would pretend I didn't know who Colby Covington was.
So Jay, is it true that Nate Diaz did father all these little motherfuckers?
That's a very interesting question, and it's an interesting one, raising the fact that he's a father now. Will he act differently in a lot of different ways, not in terms of inside the cage, but in terms of his professional appearance, his willingness to sign up and do fights, like Dana White said in the press conference. Oh, we signed him a long time ago. We had this. I think it was Karen Bryan asked the question. Oh yeah, we had the Diaz contract signed a long time ago. So the concerns that, this was a short notice, this kind of happened, and we need to put the ink on the paper, we're set. He's playing a smart game. He's playing a smart game. He took a fight that was winnable with an approach that did the job and did it well. He looked great, and he just, every possible step he could have made to improve his stock, he pretty much did. I mean, from the performance and the pre-stuff and the CBD and the press conference. Oh yeah, that post-fight interview where he called out stylistically and financially one of the best opponents he possibly could. I mean, that's a fight that I would not have thought of by my just looking at matchups, saying, what about this one? Wouldn't it cross my mind? Wouldn't have thought Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal. And then he said it, and then Jorge Masvidal smiled. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. This is it. This is the one. And maybe I'll ask this to you guys. Is Diaz Masvidal one of the kind of fights that the UFC could put on as a non-title fight to headline a pay-per-view? Is it that big of a fight?
Yes, it is. It is. Please, Michael, correct me if you think I'm wrong on this.
As much as I'd love to correct you if I thought you were wrong, you are not, my friend. This is absolutely a non-title fight main event. Put it on the pay-per-view, put it on Big ESPN if the UFC does have an aversion to doing that, which they shouldn't. But this is the fight. With Conor McGregor out of the game, people were talking about Jorge Masvidal as the biggest star. Then it was Nate Diaz fight week, and everyone said Nate Diaz is the biggest star. So what do you do when you have the biggest star call out the biggest star? You make the biggest fight. That fight stylistically is fun. Those press conferences will be insanity. Those are two straight shooters who don't care. They're not doing any of this for show. They're as true and, to quote the UFC, as real as it gets. I think this is the fight, the money fight, and I will drop everything I'm doing, including schoolwork, to watch that fight.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that one. One thing that I found very interesting, Masvidal has been campaigning for this in his numerous interviews. So he made himself available to the media during fight week. In fact, little known fact, I was behind the scenes with Submission Radio and Oscar Willis of the Mac Life when they interviewed Masvidal for their private channels. And he said to both of them, to both entities, that he wanted to fight Nate Diaz. That is a fight that he would sign on the dotted line for. Of course, he wants the title more than anything else. But he said if that's not in play, he wants the money, and he thinks Nate Diaz is the money fight and the fight that's going to boost his profile and provide the most excitement for him as a competitor. So, one thing that I do really love about this, fellas, is that Nate Diaz's return is on his own terms. Mm-hmm. This was a fight that he put together. His camp went to Team Pettis, and they made this fight and presented it to the UFC. He immediately goes on his post-fight interview and says he wants Masvidal. Like, he is calling his shots right now, and that is fantastic to watch. I think also, too, it is important that he is a father. It is important that he is followed because he's no longer thinking of, oh, I'm just a fighter and I come out here to fight and just pay me. Like, no, he's thinking legacy. He's thinking what's going to put the most money in his pocket. He's thinking what makes the most sense, and not from the sense that, okay, I want to do right by the UFC, or I want to be the company man. He's doing this saying, I am trying to improve upon my brand. And a very important fact too, he doesn't need to fight anymore. At least according to what he's saying, that CBD that he was smoking at the open workout was something from his company. So this is a guy who has his money invested in things and doesn't necessarily need that paycheck. But hey, if you're going to lure him out to fight, it better be sweet. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing that fight put together. I'd be very surprised if it didn't. Aside from the resurgence of Conor McGregor, after he's done fighting people at the old folks' home, that seems to be the most logical step next. Is anybody disagreeing with that?
No, in fact, I would say the UFC is probably breathing a big sigh of relief at this because Masvidal has been on that warpath of McGregor title shot or nothing, and competitively, it doesn't make it sense to slot him in for an immediate title shot. There's at least one person in front of him. So I'm sure the UFC was like, here's a fight we can put him into that will keep him happy and will, grab some eyeballs. So, yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
And let's bring up some recent history because about the UFC potentially messing this up. They did mess up Conor versus Cowboy.
Yep. And
that was a fight both guys wanted, but if the stories that we were hearing are true, that they wanted it to be a co-main event and not a main event, perhaps this is a stumbling block that for whatever reason the UFC is going to be hung up on. So hopefully smart things happen and this becomes a main event if that's what the two guys want.
If they did it for Nick, they got to do it for Nate, though. Nick fought Anderson Silva on a non-title fight, and that worked out great. It sold a ton. Yeah. It sold 600,000 or 800,000 buys. It was huge.
And let's not forget that Nate it was on 202 was co-main evented by a title fight, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Or was it 196 or was it both?
I'm pretty sure it was both.
So what are we doing here, fellas? Put the fight together. All right. So let's move on to what was, from a visual standpoint, just being in the building for it, a true marvel, and I mean marvel in the sense of comic books, because this was a battle right here. Paulo Costa versus Yoel Romero. Paulo Costa works out enough to do a unanimous decision, much to the ire of the Honda Center. So, Michael, I'm going to start with you, man. What was your score for this fight?
So right off the bat, congratulations and thank you to these two guys. I mean, what a fight. When this fight was booked, everyone thought this is going to be insanity. And as we all know, sometimes fights don't turn out that way. Well, this one did. That was one of the best fights of the night, one of the best fights in recent memory, really. And I would say that I did have the fight for Romero. I did think that he took the fight, but I can understand giving the scorecards to Paulo Costa if I wouldn't argue for it necessarily. but I do think the booing isn't necessary. I don't think there's any reason to boo Costa, even if the fans weren't necessarily booing Costa. It does come off that way when scorecards are read and they boo. It looks as though they're booing the fighter, even if they're booing the scorecards themselves, which I can understand, but still, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for that. But honestly, I was so impressed with Paulo Costa. I thought this was too big a step up for him. I thought Romero was going to have his way with him, and he was going to beat him to the punch. But Paulo Costa under Eric Albarracin, man, that is a scary duo. That is a scary man and a scary team overall. But the sky's the limit there.
Yeah. Shout out to Eric Albarracin. Like his coaching seemed to be getting it done, man. So Henry Cejudo, Patricio Pitbull, like there's some serious work being done over under his tutelage. All right. So Jay, please tell me if I'm out of line here, because I feel my noted anger, as Dana White called me, a very mean person. I feel it resurfacing right now, because the Honda Center disgusted me with the booing. It was really a shame. Now, whether you're booing the scorecards or not, like, get a life. Like, really. If you were in the Honda Center, please, if anybody watching this was in the Honda Center and you are booing, you are an idiot. You are an idiot, and come see me. I live in LA, so I ain't far away. Come see me. You're stupid. Fucking clowns. Jay, please. What was your score on that?
Well, on the play-by-play, I did score for Romero. I thought it was a super close fight, and it was absolutely under no circumstances a robbery. Like, I saw that word. I mean, people are so excited to be reactionary and say, robbery, I can't believe this happened. It's the worst scorecard all year. Garbage. No, it was a crazy close fight. You know how many strikes the second round was separated by? 3. It wasn't like he definitely won this round. No. It was a close fight. Now, I watched it the next day just to make sure, and I wasn't having to type furiously to take care of the play-by-play, and actually changed my mind and gave it to Costa. But something that really stuck out to me, and this is something that just infuriated me more when I thought of the crowd booing this, every single strike thrown in the entire fight, all 497 strikes thrown in that fight were significant strikes. Every single one of them was a significant strike. No pops, no taps, no. Everything was at least 60%. It was that kind of fight. And to see the crowd boo because they disagree is just horribly disrespectful to what just happened. There's just going A to B. You can't see I disagree with that. So therefore, this entire magical 15 minutes that just happened in front of us, we were losing our minds and jumping from our seats. We got to boo that because we don't think the fighter that won, the fighter that won. Whatever. Just stop. Just enjoy the fights. I mean, sometimes fights exceed our expectations. We look at them, go, I don't know, and then it turned out to be great. Kelvin Gastelum, Israel Adesanya. A fight that we thought, okay, whatever, and it turned out to be incredible. Fight of the year candidate. And sometimes our expectations for fights are so high, like this one, that we're kind of relieved when they deliver like they do. And I was so relieved when I watched that fight, just going, this is exactly how it had to be. So I am so grateful that it played out the way it did. I don't care about the scorecards. It was a great fight.
I will say, sitting cage side, it was difficult. I had to remind myself a few times that I'm here in a professional capacity and to try to keep score of this. But I scored the first 2 rounds for Costa, and I thought Romero won the third. And the thing is, I'm not really mad at someone scoring it for Romero. I do remember seeing on MMA Decisions, there was one lone media member who scored a 30-27 for Romero.
Yeah, someone in MMA Fighting, I think.
Yeah,
Jed,
so
maybe.
Oh yeah, Jed Meshew. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So I mean, and I'm not even mad at that. I don't agree with it, but I'm not really mad at that. Like, that was a chaotic fight, and there were a lot of things going on that I think, depending on your vantage point, whether you're watching on TV or where you're sitting in the arena, it probably felt a lot different. I'll tell you this though, I've never felt a body kick like I have when Costa was landing at will on Romero's body. Jesus, man, that was frightening. I've never had, actual growing pain from a knee to the balls, just sitting there cage side until that night. Like it was pure craziness. Ben, talk me off a ledge here, man. Was that in your fight of the year candidates right there?
I mean, it's in the fight of the year candidates. I don't think it's number one even now. Like it's kind of on the outskirts of the top five right now. But definitely one of the best fights of the year. One of the fights that delivered what it promised. I gave it to Costa. I gave him rounds 1 and 2, and I gave Romero round 3. I definitely thought Costa was gaining momentum at the end of round 2. He won the last 90 to 120 seconds of the round for sure. So, I mean, how you score that round really just depends on what you value when you watch fights. So I'm not mad at somebody who gave it to Romero 2 rounds to 1 either. I love the fight. When you watch a fight, there's predicting the outcome, and then there's predicting the actual narrative of the fight, and they're not always the same thing. In fact, if you watched this show 2 weeks ago, you'll probably find some idiot in this hat spouting off about how there's no possible way Vicente Luque is going to play Mike Perry's game. Like I predicted Vicente Luque to win that fight, but I'm like, there's no way he's just going to stand and bang with Mike Perry. He's just going to take him down and choke him out. Now, as it turns out, my pick for that fight was correct. My take on the narrative of that fight was completely wrong. He did stand and bang with Mike Perry and ended up, breaking his nose into 3 pieces. This fight, I thought Costa's probably going to come out super hot, put it on him for the first round, and Romero's greater experience. And even though the guy's built like a brick shithouse and he's breathing hard after 3 minutes, his greater endurance, because he's actually really good at managing his stamina and continuing to throw effective offense in the later rounds, I thought that would come into play. I was right about the narrative of the fight, even if I was wrong about the outcome. Romero lost the fight, and I would have given Costa the fight on the scorecards, even if Romero was the guy starting to roll downhill as the fight ended. But yeah, it delivered to me everything I want to see in a fight north of welterweight. 2 guys who are tired but still putting it on each other. And in the last round, there was still the thought that either guy could finish the other, which is what brings the interest.
Yeah. I can't. That's one of those fights where I'm very thankful I was in the building for, because to see those 2 gentlemen in what was clearly the most Godzilla versus King Kong type of matchup you could imagine, to see it in person. And
okay, question. I mean, is this the most Brolic UFC fight of all time, or only the most Brolic fight since Lesnar-Carwin?
Yeah. You know what? The thing is, I got to say the most Brolic. This one had to been the most Brolic, because the muscle to fat ratio on these gentlemen is just ridiculous. I mean, it had to been a combined about 6% of body fat between those 2.
Was there even a 30-inch waist in the cage?
I don't think so, man. I don't think so. Like, and then to think that Romero's 42 years old. Like, are you kidding me?
He's Cuban. He's 48 right now, probably.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there.
And we're not going to find
error
out
on the birth certificate or something. Yeah, that guy might be 76 for all we know.
Yeah, hey, we'll find out later that he's using like his nephew's name or something. He's actually 52 right now.
We'll find out like he's disqualified from getting his Social Security check or something because of the post-fight bonus.
I wanted to ask you guys something real quick. Romero, many times in the fight, would open his mouth wide as it possibly could. Not just the tongue stuff, but the he would all the way open. Now, what did you guys make of that? On the play-by-play, I had a couple thoughts about that. I wasn't sure if it was just him sucking wind, if he was taunting him, or my kind of sort of tinfoil hattish thing. He had a jaw injury. He hurt his jaw because he kept trying to open it again and all the way open again and again and again. Did he have an injury? What do you think? I don't know, Ben. What do you think?
I think you're crazy.
Okay, good.
I think he was just like playing really, really puerile mind games. It didn't work, but he was just going. Yeah.
What do you think, Michael? You think he was messing with us, or you think there was something to it?
I think he was having fun in the fight. I mean, these are 2 guys who, when they're in the ring, or the cage rather, that's where they want to be more than anything else. So I think it was a lot of enjoying the moment, maybe a little bit of taunting, because obviously at the end especially there was a lot of not necessarily
Hands
jawing, because I'm
behind the
not sure they were
back.
saying anything, but yeah, the little taunts and the flexes. But it could have been a jaw injury, and that would be very interesting to look at anyway. And on a tech note, I am running low on battery from my perch, so I will be relocating slightly to move closer to an outlet. My apologies for moving around.
Oh yeah, no
No
worries,
problem.
man. No worries. You know what? I thought that obviously the tongue sticking out was a taunt and trying to lure him into striking so he could counter or something like that. I mean, let's also keep in mind that he pointed away like outside the cage,
Yeah.
and Costa bit on that feint, and next thing you know he gets dropped. So Romero was clearly playing some games there.
Yeah.
He clearly was having his fair share of fun. But I do think when he was opening his mouth a lot, I was thinking he was having trouble with his mouth guard, like
Oh,
trying
okay.
to adjust it or something
Mhm.
like that. So and you combine that with being tired and trying to breathe, and Romero being a very expressive person. I'm sure looking at the
Jets are taking off
so
nearby where Michael is.
So Michael's all dry now and ready to rejoin us. All right, so all right, so we're gonna move on here because this is something that, although this probably could have been a buried lead, because it did fly greatly under the radar
Oh
as
yeah.
Rizin took place right after UFC 241, and while we were all collecting ourselves from what we just saw, Kyoji Horiguchi was getting knocked out by Kai Asakura. So I'll guess I'll start with you, Mike, since you're all dry now. Does Horiguchi come back from this?
Right. So just to address the elephant in the room, for those of you who are watching, I am currently in a dorm room bathroom because every room I could possibly be in is taken. So I
Cheers.
apologize for that. It is very sanitary. I brought extra little towels to put down, but yeah, nothing was going to stand in the way of my appearance here. Anyway, to answer the question, can Horiguchi bounce back? I think absolutely he can. Horiguchi is one of the best fighters in the world, let alone outside the UFC. He's a two promotion champion, and he's one of the best to do it. Going into this fight, I thought it was a sure thing for Horiguchi. I thought there was an argument to be made that he was better than Cejudo and had a better claim to the throne, rather, that Cejudo likes to talk about so often. But I think the reason why Horiguchi can bounce back from this is twofold. One, this was a non-title bout, so Horiguchi doesn't lose anything from this bout other than a fight on his record and maybe the public perception of several people, but people know that Horiguchi's still one of the best fighters. One fight and one result doesn't change that. And the second is Asakura is a great fighter. I mean, the Asakura brothers over in Rizin are Japan's answer to the Diaz brothers in the US. They're very game, they've hit hard, they're very talented strikers. And I think they're bona fide prospects too, bona fide future stars. So for Horiguchi to lose in that fashion to this fighter, I don't think it's anything that will derail his success. Obviously, he's at a great camp, and I think this is a step back, but not falling off the ladder, so to speak.
All right, so I'm reminded of our conversations on this show talking about this fight and the ridiculousness of a champion fighting in his weight class in a non-title fight. I mean, fellas, I mean, has things come back to bite two promoters on the ass this time?
Yeah, this wasn't supposed to happen. And obviously we can say that, hindsight 2020. Well, no, he was a 6-1 favorite. Nobody, I mean, pretty much nobody outside of his camp, Asakura's camp, thought that Horiguchi was going to lose this fight, let alone get smoked in 68 seconds. That's not at all how anybody expected this to play out. The best guy that Asakura had beaten beforehand was Manel Cape, who's a good fighter, very exciting, brash in his own right, but the level of competition just skyrocketed. And nobody expected, he would be ready for this. Kind of like Costa Romero. Nobody expected the level would, he'd be able to brash the level, and he did. Somebody on Twitter said this, and I couldn't read the name because it was in Japanese. They said, translation said, Horiguchi was drunk on the aura of killing as to why he let off the gas. I'm quoting, but the point was he was drunk on his own success. Is basically what they're trying to say. Is that he was high in his own momentum, etc., etc. He let it go to his head and thought, I'm going to blow through this guy. He's nothing on my radar. And then you look at the numbers and say, okay, maybe he had a reason to. I mean, Horiguchi himself had almost as many wins as Asakura's combined other prior opponents in Rizin. Two of those four were literal 500 fighters, 11 and 11. And in his first 8 fights, he fought 3 guys with winning records, and those winning records were like 2-1. So the level of competition was way different. What has to be next, obviously, is the rematch for the title, and Asakura will get his shot to take the throne. But I do have to think this hurts. This reminds me in a funny way of Christian Mpumbu in Bellator, who fought Travis View as he was the light heavyweight champion and fought Travis View in a non-title, what Bellator used to call super fights. That was their super fight.
Yeah, that was such a super fight, huh? Wow.
And
the world was waiting on that one.
And Mpumbu got beaten as the champion in his own weight class, got beaten by a guy, a veteran, a longtime veteran in Travis View. He never came back from it. He lost his title, and it just was bad from them. So could this play out like that? Maybe. Does he have a shot to reclaim his glory? Like Mike said, yeah, I can see that too. He's still a great fighter. He just got cracked.
All right, so Ben, let's get your take on this, man. If you're Scott Coker, how upset are you right now?
I mean, I have mimed Scott Coker pinching the bridge of his nose at least twice in the last 5 weeks on this show. I mean, first when Horiguchi beat Caldwell, and I said, here's where the headache of co-promotion comes in, because he cannot defend these 2 belts at the same time. The rule sets are too different. The geographical locations are too different. So one location or one promotion is already going to get the shaft. And then I pinched the bridge of my nose again in proxy of Scott Coker when this fight was announced. I said, it's an exciting fight. Asakura is like a dynamite up-and-coming prospect who brings it every time. But to book it as a non-title fight just does not make any sense. And it means that potentially the number 2 and number 3 promotions in the world will have a belt just put on hold through the end of 2019. And that's exactly what seems to be playing out. Of course, Horiguchi can come back from this. It's crazy to think that Horiguchi's still only 28 with as many things as he's done and as many high-profile fights as he's had in different promotions. He'll absolutely come back, but this hurts, and this hurts a lot. The thing that happens when you leave the UFC, for better or for worse, is your chances to really prove your mettle get fewer and further between. Like right now, I feel bad because I feel like I'm talking down on Horiguchi every time we talk about him, even though I think he may be the second, if not the number 1 best guy in 2 weight classes right now. But that's just my opinion. That's what I think and what I believe in my heart. And his chances to prove it fighting on canvas get fewer and further between. I mean, Asakura is a dynamite dude, but if he went over to the UFC and started fighting in 125 or 135, he'd go 3-3 in his first 6 fights. He's not the kind of guy that's going to put together winning streaks and fight for contend for titles in a Western promotion. And he smoked Horiguchi, and now what does he do next to come back from it? They'll find someone, and Horiguchi will dust somebody and get right back on track. But for me, who's kind of watching the trend over the last couple of years, this one hurts a lot.
I mean, when they book him again, is it going to be a title fight? I mean, this is kind of the ridiculousness of a champion not defending a belt and remaining in the same weight class. It's nuts. I remember kind of not even necessarily an argument, but having a spirited debate with former Sherdog Radio Network head TJ DeSantis on an episode of Beatdown about this, because when Daniel Cormier was fighting Anderson Silva to replace John Jones in the last minute at UFC 200, it's like, how is this not a title fight if the champion at 205 is fighting at 205? Can you imagine the pure disaster if the unthinkable were to happen? So this is just a chance you don't want to take if you have any interest in legitimizing a belt. So, yeah, I guess the next time Bellator and Rizin have some sort of co-promotion, because I'm sure this isn't going to end that whole thing, but I'm pretty sure there'll be some language in somebody's contracts specifically against this, specifically against non-title fights in that weight class, and perhaps even a talent exchange for the new champion. Because would we be mad if Asakura came over and fought Darian Caldwell in Bellator? I wouldn't be.
No.
And yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and that's if the contracts are written that way, it's a great opportunity for Bellator to continue with its momentum that Horiguchi brought over with that fight. So, just a thought, but what do I know? I'm wearing a Batman versus Superman t-shirt. You know how people can't stand that movie. All right, so let's move on to the shock and awe segment.
They made a movie?
They tried. So let's move on to shock and awe. So I want you guys to tell me what surprised you the most about any of the fights, UFC 241, Rizin, whatever the case may be. Pre-fight coverage, the fights themselves, or anything post-fight. Our special guest, Michael, I'll start with you.
Thank you. And I definitely think the Asakura win over Horiguchi is the most shocking and quote-unquote awesome thing to have happened this weekend, because, I mean, really, who could have seen that coming? Like you alluded to earlier, no one except Asakura and his camp thought that that was even thinkable. Thought that it was thinkable. That's a weird phrase, but whatever, we'll go with it. Yeah. But seriously, and also, like you were saying, the non-title fight with the champion in the weight class, that in and of itself should be pause for someone to be shocked. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind it was, but it ended up saving Horiguchi and Rizin's butt, because now he doesn't lose the title. The rematch stands for the title with even higher stakes, so you can sell that. Horiguchi retains the two-weight. I keep saying two-weight. The two division. Wow. Twice.
We know what you mean. Yeah, we know everything, bro.
Yeah. The two promotion titles. So he's able to be billed as such. 1-1, right? 2. Yes. No, I'll get there eventually. But yes, for me, that was the most stunning development of the weekend. I couldn't have seen that happening. And frankly, I think the reason why it's being talked about so often on social media, after the fact, I might add, is because no one saw this coming.
Very true. It was an afterthought, and now we're really thinking about it.
Yeah.
All right. So, shock and awe segment. Ben, tell me, what's your shock and awe moment?
I mean, it's not as shocking in the immediate sense as Asakura dusting Horiguchi, but I still just can't get over the complexion of the Diaz Pettis fight. I mean, I was high on Pettis coming into this fight, and I frankly couldn't believe how many of my compatriots in the media, how many fans, how close the Vegas odds were. You know, I didn't see it. I saw Pettis as a much more solid favorite. Even though I don't think Pettis is in his same vintage form of, 2012, 2013, 2014, when he was the most breathtaking offensive fighter this sport has ever seen, in my opinion. He was having a legitimate resurgence and was beating good people again. I didn't think he was a future welterweight title contender, but I thought he might have a second life as a top 10 fixture for a couple more years. I didn't think Diaz was going to have anything for him. And I was completely wrong. It was as if Nate Diaz had never left. The things that he is known to deliver that give Anthony Pettis problems, he delivered, and Anthony Pettis had problems with him. I mean, that's as simply as I can put it. He marched forward and kept Pettis on the back foot. Pettis has never responded well to that, and it worked, and I didn't think it would. They went to the ground. He took Pettis' back. Pettis did his crazy spin around from back control, into guard defense that I don't know why it works.
Like 3 times.
And, I mean, it worked momentarily, but just Diaz is too good, to let that change the momentum of what's really happening on the ground. So I was shocked and awed. I was completely wrong. A lot of people were completely wrong. I mean, Vegas went 1 for 5 on the main card of UFC 241. But kind of like I said earlier, where there's a difference between predicting the outcome of a fight correctly and predicting the narrative correctly, I predicted the narrative of this fight completely wrong. Like Nate Diaz showed me wrong, and I will be slow to doubt him again.
All right. Jay, tell me, what's your shock and awe moment?
So I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it unrepentantly.
Damn it,
unauthorized.
Jay.
I don't.
The only attorney on this panel is about to break the law.
Just like an attorney.
I was shocked about the Rizin in the main event. I was shocked about Stipe's adjustment in the 4th round. I was shocked about those things. But the actual true to form, most shocked, surprised, and taken aback I was the whole week was a news story that might have been in a buried lead because only a few people talk about it. Bigfoot Silva signed with Bare-Knuckle Fighting Championship. This is surprising to me because Bigfoot Silva, with all respect, can't take a punch anymore. Not to sound mean, he's 1-8 with a no contest in his last 10 with 7 knockout losses. He tried out kickboxing. He said, this is going to be fun. I'll fight Rico Verhoeven. What could possibly go wrong? He got starched. He's going to fight Gregory Tony in November, a larger man than he is. For a super heavyweight title, probably won't go well for him. Bigfoot Silva is going to be 40 years old in a month. There is no point to what he's doing here. He's not going to make a ton of money from what we've been told. Bare-Knuckle FC paychecks they vary significantly. You're the star and get paid pretty darn well, or you're not and aren't. All he's going to do is get punched in the face in this promotion. Does he understand this? That this is all that's going to happen, is there are going to be guys his size or so hitting him in the face repeatedly. Is he going to be on TRT? Will it matter? He's 40 and he's taken a lot of punishment. I'm actually flabbergasted. I'd love to be able to use that word, that Bigfoot Silva has decided to become a bare-knuckle fighter. It just, in what world is that a good idea now? I don't even know.
I will second the love of the word flabbergasted. That's a fantastic word, and I encourage everyone watching to use it as often as possible. But I think, Jay, you're neglecting one very important factor in this. Because Bigfoot Silva, he hasn't tasted championship gold since Elite XC. And if he gets past this matchup, it's a strong possibility he'll get the fight for the hepatitis championship of the world. So, hey. Alexander Emelianenko, he's got you. He's watching. Wow, what a dumpster fire BKFC is.
It truly is.
It's just ridiculous. Well, speaking of dumpster fires, I'm going to give you my shock and awe moment, and that was the appearance of Colby Covington at the Honda Center for UFC 241. It is equal parts amazing. It's sickening. It's funny. It's every emotion wrapped up into one. Watching anything related to Colby Covington, he came through to Southern California with his famous MAGA hat, with his outdated championship belt, and his cheesy grin, smiling and getting booed. I don't know if this came across on the broadcast very well, but there was a chant that Colby sucks as he's walking in there after a ferocious chorus of boos, and that chant morphed very rapidly into
what did
fuck
it turn
Colby.
To?
it turned to Colby sucks to fuck Colby. So, man, the gimmick is working. People are paying attention to this dude, and I'm here for it. It's funny as hell. So, all right, we're going to move on to a topic near and dear to the heart of Mr. Fiedel, who's done some fantastic work in this regard on one championship. So I definitely want to keep this forum open, fellas. So feel free, jump in if we're making some points and we get some disagreement. I love to disagree. So for the first time... So for the first time in quite some time, because I don't believe they had any sort of weigh-ins open to the public in any sort of way since the last traditional weigh-in where a fighter ended up dying due to his cut, and then they implemented this hydration system. So they actually had a live stream of the weigh-ins for their August 16th show. Now, 6 fighters missed weight or the hydration threshold. Doesn't seem like anything was quite done about that, if I'm not mistaken. I don't I think everything carried on as if nothing happened. But Michael, is this a step in the right direction? Are we headed to a better era of transparency with one championship?
Right. So absolutely. I've done a bit of reporting on one championship, and it hasn't necessarily been positive developments. So I can understand why people think I'm anti one. For the record, I am not. I think they put on a great product, and you and I have discussed 4-ounce glove
Oh,
kickboxing is one of the best things in the
oh,
world.
it's my heart. Oh, I love it.
They have an incredible roster. They put on great fights, and I do enjoy their product. However, for me, the issues come with transparency and conflicts of interest, of which there are many, or appear to be many, in one championship. And one of the biggest ones is the one championship weigh-in system. Now, of course, as you mentioned, in December of 2015, Chinese fighter Yang Jianbing, who was 21, 22, died following weight cutting complications for an event in the Philippines. After this, one championship took drastic measures and completely overhauled their weight cutting system. They moved everyone up a weight class, so bantamweights who were 135 would move up to 145 pounds, but remain bantamweights. They banned IV usage for weight cutting. They implemented hydration testing that is seen in high school and collegiate wrestling, and they imposed multiple day weigh-ins. So I believe it's Tuesday and Wednesday. No, Monday and Tuesday of event week, fighters will weigh in as a check, the way the UFC fighters do in California. And then the Wednesday and Thursday weigh-ins will be the weigh-ins that count for the fight. If you make weight for both of those, you're good to go. You don't have to weigh in on the Friday. If you miss on one of those, you do have to weigh in on event day. So the way that it works is essentially to keep fighters from cutting a drastic amount of weight. You don't have the IV, so you can't replenish often. You are moved up a weight class, so theoretically you don't have to cut as much. You're hydration testing, so you can't be cutting an excessive amount of weight of water in your body. And there are multiple weigh-ins. So even if you were doing any of those things or getting around them, there are barriers to keep you from doing it often. So the system looks great. And a lot of people tout it on social media and from one's staff, one's fighters, as the panacea to weight cutting. Now, we don't know whether or not that's true because of the transparency issue. So we haven't been able to see any of these results until now. For the Dreams of Gold event, they did stream one weigh-in. So I believe it was the Thursday weigh-ins. And it was essentially the fighters getting their specific gravity test of the urine tested to see whether or not they were hydrated, and them stepping on the scale. And to their credit, one announced that fighters missed weight. One of the big concerns that cynics and people like myself who were concerned with the transparency issue was that one championship could sweep anything they wanted under the rug because there's no athletic commission oversight. There's no independent body that's doing the weigh-ins. So if one wanted to, theoretically, they could let everyone, or say everyone made weight, say everyone made hydration, when that wasn't the case, which is obviously unfair to the fighters who do make weight, unfair to the fighters who do adhere to the system, and unfair to the public who are taking one's word. So this was a good step. However, obviously some issues persisted. It was all one championship staff again who were measuring both the weight and the hydration and announcing it. So we don't have an independent body to fact check that, which leaves the door open to conflicts of interest, both from one and from Evolve MMA. Obviously, apparent or otherwise, there is a conflict of interest with Chatri Sichadong, the founder, CEO, and chairman of One Championship, owning and operating, and according to several fighters, coaches, and sources around the Evolve gym, regularly running the practices and training with the Evolve team. Dana Bluen, who runs the Asian MMA podcast, has a great segment on that. So the conflict of interest, apparent or otherwise, and the lack of transparency was a major issue. So the streaming the weigh-ins is a good step forward, but there are still so many things we don't know. To One's credit, they did release a press release. I believe it was 2 hours prior to the event at 4 a.m. I was awake. We're not going to go into why, but I saw that they did release the second attempts for the fighters, their weights and hydrations. Everyone had passed except for one fighter whose bout was removed from the event. So kudos to One for that. It shows that at least to some degree, the rules are being followed, but without athletic commission oversight or full transparency, there's no way to verify one's claims. And that, for me, is where the problem lies.
You know what? I just got to jump in there for a second, because what I think we all really want to know is, was Rich Franklin wearing gloves this time?
It wasn't Rich Franklin. It was a staff member I have not seen before. I believe it was someone who was brought in. Now, the picture of Rich Franklin in the cargo shorts has made the rounds, as well as Bashir Ahmad, who is a one championship employee. That was recently a Japanese fighter had posted on Instagram images of him essentially making weight, and then Bashir Ahmad handling the urine samples. So I think that got one championship to act on this after it drew a lot of criticism and conversation on social media. But the individual appeared to be a medical professional. I have no knowledge of that, but in my interview with Gary Tonin, he said a medical official is the one who's administering these hydration tests, and also it was someone who was wearing gloves. So, like me in this bathroom, they were sanitary.
All right, fellas. So what do you guys think here? Is this a step in the right direction? Are we moving toward true transparency, or is this just smoke and mirrors?
I'll jump in just because I don't have too much to add. Michael covered it so well and in such correct detail. He covered kind of all the points that I was really thinking of coming into this. And as someone who also has been very hard on one championship in the last year or two, to the point that like I have gotten nasty emails sent to our poor beleaguered editor in chief, like asking him to change things that I've written in an op-ed. I saw this as an enormously positive thing. Is it perfect? No. There are two main problems with it, and I'll get to the problems at the end, but in general, just the move towards transparency, the acknowledgement that people are out here talking about this is a really positive move. I mean, so many MMA promotions are completely tone deaf in ignoring the complaints and the concerns of their present or prospective fan base. So to see them even do this, I didn't think they would ever do it. Like, flat out, I am shocked that they did this at all. I mean, it would have been my shock and awe moment or my buried lead, except that I knew we'd be talking about it anyway. So it is a great move. And if they are serious about making inroads into North America, which they apparently are if they're opening offices in New York and LA, this is a step they had to take. So kudos to them. My big issue is the same one that Michael brought up, that this is still not overseen by a third party, which if they want to do this in North America, it will be eventually. But they seem to be pretty transparent about it and just being frank about the people who had missed weight and actually scotching a fight. So good for them. And the minor quibble is that they chose a pretty low stakes card from MMA standards to do the test run of this on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to if this is going to be a continuing thing, if they're going to make the other weigh-ins available to stream. But Ben, I agree with you on that. This is, my opinion, this is something that is signaling they are dead serious about making their way into the U.S. Because this is, you can't avoid it. And we can sit here and rag on the athletic commissions as much as we want, and deservedly so. You being in Texas, you know what that's like. Mike, you being in Florida, you know what that's Texas, like.
I've never seen it. I've never seen an athletic commission. I know some of those people. They're going to kick my ass next weekend now.
But like, so we see how silly athletic commissions can be a lot of times. And I've been in a room with commission officials being questioned as to why they allowed a fight to move on several days' notice to California. So like, we've all seen the trickery of athletic commissions and what can go wrong there. However, you gotta play the game if you're intending on making a move in the U.S. And this seems to be the beginning of that. Jay, correct me if you think I'm wrong in this one. I think the next logical step is to then to now invite or just straight out hire commission officials from California, from Nevada, from New Jersey, from some of the more respected commissions, and they can oversee some of these procedures, even if they're not acting on an official capacity, just to familiarize themselves with how one works, and maybe that can be the beginning of them really making an effort in the U.S.
It has to. They have to do something like that, because since, as we point out, the absence of athletic commissions means that one will run it until they bring somebody else to do it. They have the control over it to do that. They have the ability to do it. Now, whether they choose to remains to be seen. I know, just for example, Bellator, when they hold events in localities that don't have commissions, they will bring a commissioner, Mike Mazzulli from Connecticut, to oversee this. So at least they have a commission official observing the proceedings, making sure things are as copacetic as they can be. So at least they have that going. Now, we'll go negative Nancy for a few little bars here. When 20% of the fighters in the card miss weight or are too dehydrated, and that card has 15 fights on it, you have a problem. There's no possible way to deny it. That's the kind of thing you see, in all respect to the world, kick Ben's tail if when you see him next for me saying this, that you might see in the LFA when they call up regional fighters from wherever to take one-day notice fights. Okay, that's understandable. But when one championship schedules this event a long time ahead of time, how do we know? Because we have event schedules until the end of the year already, thoroughly vetted out. So this is long prepared, and they say, oh, and then all these fighters miss weight. When it's the first time we see the weigh-ins since 2015, we find 6 fighters running into issues. 5 missed weight. One of them was too dehydrated in the thresholds they keep for how they cut weight. It indirectly confirms to me there is no possible way that every single fighter before and in that time from 2015 to August 2019 all made weight. And you know what one championship said? They all made weight, unless they specifically had a catchweight fight. Now, granted, I can tell you this, I have not watched every single one championship fight, so it is entirely possible there were fights that were announced as so-and-so weight. But to everything I have seen, every fight took place at a standard weight class, and both fighters made weight properly. Statistically speaking, the odds of that are insurmountable. Impossible that every fighter has made weight along the way. So for them to portray this as we're coming a long way, we're going to make it, we're going to do it, and we're going to show you guys everything, it seems almost like smoke and mirrors to me.
Dude, wherever he is right now, Angla's right arm weighs 186 pounds.
I mean, when fighters make weight, like what Michael said, they have the stream on the weigh-in day, and then they have to go back and try and make weight and come back. And one championship at the last second release a one championship press release saying, "Oh yeah, these guys are good, except for this one, he's not, and we're out of here." That's it. That's all we receive. That's all we got. I can't take what they say as gospel, given if I see one history. Thing,
yeah.
If I see one thing and it says it's nonsense, I can't just go, well, we're okay. They threw one fight off the card, and it was a prelim card. They taken off the Joe Nottoway fight. Okay, then we're talking. Maybe they're taking it seriously. It stinks to high heaven to me. It's process, maybe.
Right.
If
we
get it, but okay. But if not, I don't know.
It's hopeful in the sense that it's better than some of the communications that I've seen between, and I know you've seen these too, and Michael, I'm sure you've had these as well in your inbox. Communications with one championship employees asking for information about weights, about weigh-ins and weight cuts and their hydration system, and being sent back a press release. Or like a program to the event that has a page that says this is how we weigh in, things that just simply aren't sufficient. So it's better than that, but still I'd like to see the actual paperwork from the medical professionals that are conducting these hydration tests. Of course, I would have no idea what I'm looking at, but I'll Google it. I'll figure it out. When you have the column that says this number point whatever, and I'll figure out what that means. But we don't have anything to verify their press releases, and that's always the problem. Everything filters through them, and we've already seen that the word filtering through them cannot be trusted, especially where coming. Well, Michael, what was this a few weeks ago? That you narrowed down the link between, or excuse me, the non-existent link between one championship and WADA.
Right.
Right. So we're talking about a promotion that just in this past month has made these bold claims and blatantly lied. So it is very difficult to just say hey, this is great, and just thumbs up and, keep moving along. I will give them credit where credit is due. They are at least trying. It's at least something, because if anything else, they've opened themselves up to getting picked apart more, as we're doing right now. And I hopefully this is a lesson to them, because I'm sure they are watching this. Because there are too many people on this panel that are too vocally critical of one championship. So, hi, Chatri. But this is what we're talking about here.
Sorry, Lauren.
Yeah. So you have to think, like, by putting that video out, by having that stream available, it didn't quiet down the criticisms, but it's going to open up more. And it's going to be us picking it apart, and we're going to be watching, and we're going to be watching even closer. And the only thing you can do is step up to the challenge and do things properly and be transparent. That is the only way. So half measures will not be accepted, but I'll commend you for starting.
If I may, just one last point.
Yeah, of course.
And it truly is a bummer that we have to do this, because I genuinely believe that one championship system is a future for if not solving, fixing or improving the way weight cutting works. I genuinely believe that the measures they're enacting, if followed properly by the athletes and shown to be implemented fairly and enforced consistently, could be so much better for the athletes than what they're currently dealing with. The problems arise, as we've mentioned, if these things aren't being implemented and if fighters are gaming the system. If that's happening, all it's doing is putting the fighters who are doing the right thing. Uriah Faber on the MMA Hour with Luke Thomas talked about Sage Northcutt falling into this category. It puts those guys at a disadvantage. I genuinely believe that one system could be better for the fighters if they have the oversight, and if it proves to be better, I have no qualms whatsoever about applauding it, advocating for it, and pushing for it. But without the information, without the data, without the transparency, and without the verification of anything that we've seen, there's no way I can get behind the system.
Oh, Michael, ye of little faith, you have no faith in the word of a fight promoter. Oh, bad, Michael. All right. Now, in a related topic here, in a roundabout way, California State Athletic Commission is proposing that they will X a fight off of a card if a fighter weighs above 15% of their weight class limit on fight day. So, just quickly here, fellas, and I'll start with you, Ben. Like, you like this idea or not?
Love it. This is the perfect thing to do. I can't really say much more to it than that. This is the kind of thing they need to do. Make people weigh in, and then do an in-cage or in-ring, on the way to the cage weigh-in, where they can only be a certain percentage above their weight class. Like, that's the way to do it. That beats the hell out of taking the specific gravity of somebody's piss cup.
Yeah, great. Jay, are you in favor of this?
100%. I am all the way in favor of it, even knowing that 3 of the fights on the card for 241 would have been canceled outright if this were happening. Sabina Mazo was over 15% above her weight class. Manny Bermudez was he gained 25 pounds above his catchweight fight, so that's ludicrous. And Sadiq Yusuf was also well above. It's the kind of solution that would start out terrible. It would absolutely be a catastrophe for cards to start up, and then it would clean up pretty quickly. It would make a huge mess. It would scrap some main events, some co-main events, maybe even title fight. It would mess things up really badly, but it has to be done. It absolutely has to be done, or we're going to get something worse than what happened with Aspen Ladd recently. It just needs to be done. So I am all for this.
All right. So, Michael, do you agree with me, or are you wrong? This makes a lot of sense.
Well, actually, I'm not going to lie. I am going to disagree slightly. I do think that there are merits to this system. I will explain. I do think there are merits to the system. I think it would do good things in the sense that fighters wouldn't be able to cut as much weight in theory. The problem is, as we see with weight cutting currently, no one who's cutting weight is healthily doing it. Mm-hmm. They're depleting themselves, dehydrating themselves, restricting what they can eat and how much they're sweating, restricting what they can eat and increasing how much they're sweating in an arms race to be the biggest and the strongest at a smaller weight. If we implement this system, or if the California State Athletic Commission does so, where a fighter can't be more than 15% above the weight class on fight day, My fear is that fighters are going to stay dehydrated longer. Instead of simply staying within a natural weight class and not cutting as much so that they hit that 15% buffer, they would instead dehydrate themselves for longer. And a situation I think that exemplifies this is the Darren Till Stephen Thompson weigh-in, where Till missed weight, and one of the conditions was he had to make weight or be under a certain percentage for the Thompson fight on fight day. And that just led to Till being dehydrated for longer, which is something I think we all want to avoid with fighters about to go into the cage. So like you said, Jay, of course, this is going to shake up cards. So many people are going to miss because they're not used to it. But at the same time, I think it could lead to fighters dehydrating more to try and cheat this system too. So I don't think that would necessarily be the widespread use of this rule, and hopefully it wouldn't take action. But if it does, we could have fighters who are actually being hurt by this rule rather than helped.
It's just definitely a possibility. That's something that I guess we didn't consider in our haste. The only thing is, any coach that would allow a fighter to step in the cage dehydrated is lower than low. Like that's not even, that shouldn't be tolerable. And Michael, I know you train, so I'm sure you've seen weight cuts up close and stuff, and of course access to media. Ben, I know your time as a wrestler, you've experienced some weight cuts, and Jay, we've been around MMA too long to not see it, and I've seen my fair share of weight cuts, and there's no way in hell that a fighter that is dehydrated beyond a certain point should be stepping in that cage whatsoever. Absolutely. It's even unrealistic from a scientific standpoint for them to say right after you step off the scale for the fight day weigh-in to go chug some Pedialyte, because it's not going to absorb in your body in time for you to be actually truly hydrated.
Did the commission announce what time the fight day weigh-in would be?
Not that I saw.
Okay, just for the window, because if obviously it was closer to fight day, I would imagine fighters wouldn't be doing the extra dehydration that I talked about.
Right. And I believe North Carolina does that. And if I'm not mistaken, that is why the UFC has only been to North Carolina once. Which
is another potential downside of implementing this rule.
They may just fail in California.
Great, but it won't be implemented.
California is too big of a market. You can't just duck.
Actually, California being the one that suggested it is part of why I'm cautiously supportive of it, because they've also shown their willingness to tell a particular fighter, you do not get to fight at this weight again in this state.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you can suck yourself dry and rehydrate yourself only partially in the next 24 hours, but at least after the fight, they're going to tell you, you don't get to fight in this weight class in our jurisdiction again. Yeah, I mean, that's at least part of it. It's not a perfect solution, but it is certainly better than what's going on now, is what I'd say.
Absolutely agreed. So we are running a little bit over time, so we're actually going to have a true lightning round this time. Or maybe we won't, and then maybe I'll just cut a topic later. But let's go ahead and get started here, because we do have some fun stuff to talk about. Let me set up the stopwatch. You have 30 seconds, gentlemen, to answer the following questions. But we'll mix up the format just a little bit. So I'm going to start with you, Ben, since you are the incredible man who keeps such wonderful time. Please go over again so I can cut you off. I'm going to ask you this question, Ben. Where do you place Kamal Worthy's upset knockout of Devontae Smith among the greatest MMA upsets of all time? You have 30 seconds, my man. Go.
I don't place it among the greatest MMA upsets of all time. It may not even be the upset of the year at the end of this year. It was definitely shocking, but if I started writing them down on paper, I'd get to 25 upsets before I got to this one. Surprising upset, big upset on the odds, but that's more likely to happen when you have somebody debuting in the promotion. More shocking that they're former training partners and we didn't know this was going to happen, because usually we know who has the upper hand.
All right. Oh, unfortunately, you came in under time, preventing me from cutting you off so rudely. So, Michael, I'm going to ask you this question. Daniel Cormier weighed in at 236.5 pounds, and on fight day, he was 247. So what could account for such a substantial increase for a heavyweight? You have 30 seconds, my man. Go.
Right. So I'm going to take the first 5 seconds to apologize for how long I talked about the one championship weigh-ins. I definitely apologize to both you guys and the viewers. And now to talk about Cormier, I don't know. I really don't know what could have led to that kind of a weight increase. It doesn't make too much sense to me. I was dreading this question, so of course it got to me. Maybe he was training the morning of the weigh-ins and was dehydrated or hadn't eaten, and then he did both of those during fight day. I really don't know. I mean, 11 pounds, that's like me on a Saturday.
Oh, right. Exactly 30 seconds, man. That's incredible. All right, Jay. Last question for the lightning round for you. Cain Velasquez, Luke Rockhold, and Daniel Cormier have all been brutally finished in their last fights. Do you think this is a bad sign for Khabib Nurmagomedov? And go.
Look, guys, Father Time is undefeated. Cain was 36 when he lost, Luke Rockhold 34, and Cormier 40. Something interesting to point out is that Rockhold got sparked by Bisping in California. Cain got knocked out by Dos Santos in the Honda Center. Cormier gets thumped in the same building, so that's interesting. The California guys, they're going to stay in California. It has to get under the skin of a guy knowing his training partners got smoked that year, right? It has to get in your head. It has to.
Oh, man, I just thought you were going to say something else and give me the chance to cut you off, but, man, you stopped right on time. Beautiful work. All right, so I'll go ahead and address these in order, and I probably won't even need 30 seconds. Number one, Kamal Worthy's upset knockout. No, sorry, not ranking that all time. Pretty spectacular to watch it happen, but no, not all time. Daniel Cormier weighing in at 247 on the day of the fight. Actually, Matt Hunter, who was doing video and photography with me for UFC 241, believed that Cormier looked like he was cutting weight. He looked tired. He was sweating a lot and stuff. Perhaps he was sick. That's my guess, is that he had some sort of illness and that made him sweat, and then maybe he was just getting over it and kind of rehydrated. All right, and for the third question, I don't think Khabib Nurmagomedov has anything to worry about necessarily as far as AKA superstition. Also, though, the superstition that you brought up, Jay, I brought that up to Daniel Cormier on 241 Media Day. He acknowledged it and was like, hey, Southern California hasn't been the spot for me and my friends, but I'll try to break it. And also, Cormier was finished in the Honda Center against John Jones at 214. Right. So
that's right.
Yeah, rough area for AKA to get down. All right, guys. So there is no UFC this week. Man, so we take a little breather, go ahead and actually plan social lives, but don't get too excited because Bellator 225 is going down. The main event being Matt Mitrione versus Sergey Karatanov in the rematch of the Testes. So, fellas, I would like to know what other fights might stick out to you on this card. What are you looking forward to? Open forum. Let's get it.
I'll jump in. This is such a Bellator card. There are 16 fights on this card. I mean, there's a fight on the prelims that is literally 2 0-0 guys getting it on. Like, Bellator is like a weird, like, ultra high level, like, track for prospects from other combat sports, you know, whether it be like karate or wrestling or whatever, mixed with a UFC like seniors tour, mixed with the worst like local regional promotion you've ever seen, all stapled together into this disgusting chimera of like, you know, mixed martial arts promotion. I mean, Nick Newell is on the prelims, and with all due respect to Nick Newell, because I think he is completely fucking awesome. You know, like, I've seen a lot of his fights. I think like he does incredibly impressive things in the cage. I think he's a really interesting and intelligent voice out of the cage. But the fact remains that, you know, to a lot of the viewing public, he is most interesting for being a congenital amputee who somehow still manages to fight people with 4 sound limbs in a cage. And he is relegated to the prelims. But before he feels any kind of bad about that, he should know that on the main card is Austin Vanderford, and what's the only thing he's famous for?
Being Paige Van Zandt's
Wait, that's husband. On the main card?
It's 6 fights from the top.
Oh, I thought it was only 5. I was hoping that Mr. Van Zandt was on the prelims too, because otherwise that wouldn't make sense. It could be.
Yeah, Austin Vanderford, the most famous husband on Instagram is on the main card. So that just goes to show you Bellator matchmaking. I mean, Kastriot Shama, I know his name, even though he's a 3-3 fighter, because he lives in Connecticut and fights in Connecticut. That is what kind of regional promotion Bellator has become for itself. You know, he's 3-3 in his entire career. 5 of his 6 fights are in Bellator, and he's like 2-3 in those. You know, that's just kind of what Bellator does. It does the regional promotion thing where it lards the undercards with basically unknown fighters who just have to sell tickets to their family, friends,
one
and
fight
teammates.
deals. Fight deals.
Oh, no, dude, you come down here to Houston, and I'll take you to a show, and there will be 7 guys on that card that have 1 fight in Bellator.
Yep.
You know, that's just kind of how it rolls. It's going to be a very, very Bellator card. I'm so glad I don't have play-by-play or scoring duties for it, but I will definitely be watching it with a glass in hand, and I'll have a bingo card for the Nutshot Derby.
Oh my God! And just another interesting note about the placement on this card: Ricky Bandejas, who's most known for sidekicking James Gallagher to death, lost 2 in a row. Won a good fight against Juan Archuleta on a very high-profile card, which probably shouldn't have dropped his stock too much, but his last loss to Patrick Mix, I guess now they've decided that he needs to be way low on the prelims. So very curious how they set this up. Bellator, not known for doing right by matchmaking a lot of times. We even got a young lady named Taylor Turner, who is 3-5 on the main card, but Nick Newell is in the prelims. What are we doing here? Please tell me, what are we doing?
Man, it is a Bellator card. You can almost use it as a verb or as an adjective, depending on how you want to go with it. They have a mishmash card that you don't quite understand. They got the regional talent, and you go, okay, they're in Connecticut, so they're going to have a bunch of those guys. They're going to have that for like the first 4 fights of the card are going to be ticket sellers, and then you have a card then you have a fight that should be on the main card that's just number 5 in the night, just in the middle of the prelims, that you're like, what are you doing there? Why aren't you up higher in the card? And then they'll headline the prelims with potentially 0-0 fighters. So the card placement, I don't know, other than being they want to use them as swing bouts. They want to use them as, okay, we run a little long, we want to kick you afterwards to the dark or the zone post-lim card. But then they did that to David Rickles. Who's fought for them more than any other fighter. Now, he's fought for them more than anybody else, and they dumped him on the prelim card, and it just didn't make sense. They're finally putting him on the main card again against, oh, that's right, that other unbeaten guy, the Dynamo, Yaroslav Amosov, 21-0.
Little known fact, Dave Rickles is nicknamed the Caveman because he fights half of his fights in a place with no electricity or lights. Also known as the Bellator Arena after the main event.
After dark. Now, I'm really curious about Amosov because who has he beaten in Bellator? Gerald Harris, Eric Silva. Names, old veterans. Okay, fine, but he's 21-0, and those are his tests. He has a split decision against KSW champion Roberto Soldic. That's it. And then you look at David Rickles. He's got a long record. He's fought in Bellator forever. His only losses are to Michael Venom Page, Michael Chandler, Patricky, the lightweight pitbull, and Carl Amasu. So he only loses to the best guys. So this could mean something. And also, Alexei Konchenko, who is in the UFC, lost his first fight. He was 20-0. So the only other fighter above 20-0 now is Khabib, besides Yaroslav Amosov. So that's kind of a cool thing. Got the long-time unbeaten guys going. So, let's see what happens.
All right, cool. So, Michael, what are you looking forward to on this, or what just stands out to you on this lineup?
Right, so I'll echo a lot of what you guys said, but additionally, I do think Sabah Hamasi is on the card. Mm-hmm. He's always exciting, so that should be fun. Of course, prelims. Connery Gracie, son of Hoist Gracie, is going to be on the card. He's 1-1, looking to kind of continue the Gracie lineage as far as Bellator with Neiman's recent loss. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, isn't Tyrell Fortune also on this card? Former NCAA Division II champion. Yep. He's one of the brightest prospects in MMA, in my opinion. 6-0, looks better and better each time out. I'm excited for his fight, but prelims, I believe.
No.
Fortune's fighting Rudy in the main card, actually.
Fortune's the dude who's been buried on the prelims forever.
He's also 6-0, knocking people out.
Yeah, they finally moved him up, but yeah.
Good. Yeah. See, I assumed and I was wrong, and it's good that we can admit that.
Hey, it's all right, man. Bellator does a lot of Bellator things. You
Right.
might have
Well,
heard a
I'm very
diatribe
happy
by.
he's on the main.
I mean, to be
Yeah.
really honest, we just brought you on to rant about one.
Well, a lot of people think I'm good at that.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
It's not anti-one, it's anti-lack of transparency.
They go hand in hand.
All right, it's a beautiful thing. All right, fellas. So we've got one last segment, and that is the buried lead. So quickly, give me your buried lead for the week. What story should have gotten more attention, in your opinion? I'll start with you, Ben.
Let me swallow my ice cube.
I'll start with you, Jay.
All right, let's get weird. Let's get political. Let's get out of the fighting world, but still kind of tangentially connected. Somebody on change.org, which is the national petition site, started a petition for UFC color commentator Joe Rogan to moderate a 2020 presidential debate. As of today, the petition has over 200,000 signatures. 200,000 people said, "I want to see Joe Rogan moderate a debate." I don't think Joe Rogan's weighed in on it yet. But they cited he's had guests from all different parties. He's not connected to any specific media outlet, so he won't be towing a partisan or company line, and he's pretty open-minded. So who the heck? Politics are weird. We're not going to go into it. We theoretically could have Joe Rogan moderate a presidential debate. Let's get weird, boys.
A Kanye interview, or it didn't happen.
Open-minded to a fault, we might say.
Elizabeth Warren, have you tried DMT?
Have you tried pouring some butter in your coffee to open your third eye? Like, you could say the most ridiculous shit on his show, and all he's going to say is we should look into that.
Yeah, let's look at it. Bring it. What if Eddie Bravo?
Hey, Jamie, Google that. Google that.
Jamie, pull that up.
All right, Michael, what's your buried lead for the week?
I would definitely say, I know we've spoken about it, so on this show it hasn't been buried at all, but the one championship weigh-in step, I think it's a very good step in the right direction, although like we discussed, I do still feel like there are a lot of things that one can improve upon, but I do think this is, like we mentioned on the broadcast, a very big step for one in their efforts to come to the U.S. They're expanding with offices. They've recently made the weigh-ins public. They've been touting the drug testing program for a long time. So these are all things that would be prerequisites to U.S. fights. And one of the biggest things, Chatri Sichadong on Facebook recently announced the 1 Century event, which, oh my gosh, is that loaded. That's going to be such a great event. So many great fights, champions, Pancrase versus Shuto, champion versus champion.
Champions on the card at 1? Are you serious?
Wow.
Yeah. Well, one has... They were expanding into Japan, so they have the developmental deals with Shuto and Pancrase, so now they're going at it, which is amazing. But what one is doing is they're having a double header, 2 shows on that day, both 11 fight cards, and one of them will be airing live Saturday night on TNT. Right. So a big step for the U.S. audience. It looks like one's making the jump to the U.S. any day now. They're getting everything, the pieces in place, and hopefully with a move to the U.S. comes more athletic commission oversight, because I'd love to see if one's weigh-in system is the way forward.
All right. Ben, tell me, what's your buried lead?
Well, I mean, as is my habit, I usually bring a lead that's not buried so much as like fairly new, but you know, we learned within the last 24 to 36 hours that former UFC heavyweight champ Junior Dos Santos will be appearing within the next couple weeks on the newest season of Dancing with the Stars in Brazil. And he is a man known for his footwork, excellent footwork by heavyweight standards, by heavyweight MMA standards. We'll get to see if that carries over to the tiled floors of the dancing-based reality show. He'll be the 3rd UFC champion to take this on. I mean, Chuck Liddell did it. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira did it on the Brazilian version. Neither of them did all that hot. Frankly, physically, they were a little bit shot by the time they did it.
Didn't Randy Couture do it also?
If Randy Couture did it, I didn't see it. But I certainly saw
Paige did.
I saw Paige Van Zandt came in second.
Yeah.
I mean, she actually made the finals and came in second. She's the only one that's actually done a good job at this. But I mean, right now I can just see Henry Cejudo's ears turning red. Like, wait, somebody's looking at picking up a championship in another sport. So look for him to become like 4C, quadruple C, Henry Cejudo anytime now, and get his midget ass out like dancing, you know, in like some tuxedo pants and a vest by this time next year.
Well, I'm gonna pretend like I didn't hear that. So my buried lead for the week is the return of Stefan Struve. He retired, I think it was last year or earlier this year. Actually, it was like in March or something. This really wasn't that long ago. And now he is unretired that quickly. He retired long enough to have a normal break between fight camps to face Ben Rothwell at the UFC's ESPN Plus event on December 7th in my hometown of Washington, D.C. So, yeah, that's happening. Okay. All right, gentlemen. So that will do it for this edition of Off the Chain. So,
hold on. I'm sorry I got to interrupt. I'm going to steal one more buried lead. An MMA fighter team appeared on Celebrity Family Feud just on Sunday night. Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, Tyron Woodley, Alima McFarlane, and Ryan Bader. And they competed against the Bella Twins from WWE. I guess they were a twin sister act in pro wrestling. And their family. The MMA team got smoked. So that happened. They all looked a little nervous. They all answered they all gave some dumb answers and everybody laughed. So, yeah, that happened and we all let it happen. So,
and I will do everything possible to not see a single second of it. I need to preserve my sanity there. So with that, we'll wrap up this edition of Off the Chain. So go ahead and let you guys know where you can find your work on social media. Michael, please tell the good folks where they can find you and your work.
Right. Thank you very much. And again, thank you guys for having me. My apologies for the, we're going to call it technical, but the technical difficulties that we faced so far tonight. But you can find me on Twitter at Michael Fiedel and my work over at The Body Lock and on Flow Combat. Thank you again, guys.
Thank you for joining us. Jay, tell the good folks where they can find you.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at Jay Pettry, Jay Pettry. You can find me on Sherdog.com on the little features page. There's a drop down. You can find several of us there. And you can look and check out all the work. I am the Sherdog.com play-by-play writer for all UFC events, so I'll be right there. I was right there in the midst of 241 with everybody in the trenches. I write pre and post event betting odd pieces, breaking down what are the best picks, what are the best plays, and how do we do afterwards. I write fight facts pieces, analyzing the stats, interesting information, and fun facts of all the cards too. So yeah, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You can find me everywhere. So check it out, try it out.
All right. And Ben, tell the good folks where they can find you.
I'm Ben Duffy. I'm a senior editor at Sherdog.com. You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy. You can find me here every Tuesday afternoon. And I will be cracking wise in the first hour and chewing ice in the second hour.
All right, and I'm Ant Walker. You can find me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. You could also find my work on Sherdog.com, drop down menu, and as well MMA on Point. So go ahead, check those out. There definitely will not be a Walkout Network post-fight show on my YouTube channel for the Bellator card, but I might do a general one.
No. I'm gonna press you to like bring me on as a guest and like talk shit about that show.
Oh, that actually sounds like a good time. So maybe we'll go ahead and do that. All right, gentlemen. Everybody. So you know what you got to do. Oh wait, before I start that, we want to thank again our guest Michael Fiedel for joining us
thank you much.
Sharing your insights on One Championship and everything else mixed martial arts related. Now let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. So you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. While drunk on the aura of killing, make sure your thoughts are thinkable, and through it all, you must stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.
Doing it guerrilla style. I love this.
Yeah.
All right. So everything should be recording when you see when the timer starts. All right, cool. Timer has started. And
How we doing? We square, we centered.
yeah,
Good,
everybody
good,
looks
good.
yeah, everybody looks centered in their shots. In fact, I might need to center mine a little bit more.
Is my microphone? No, my microphone's out of the shot, so we're good there.
Yeah, you sound